So this is the last video in the, or the last group of videos in the TV boy assignment video tutorials. These ones are going to be fairly quick because we went over what we do to construct the body in class, and a lot of you seem to really get it quite fast and to a pretty good degree of understanding. So I'm not going to go into too much detail. I'm literally just going to go through and make the body. So this is what we're going to end up with at the end. I've not got the plug at the back on the left side in this version, but when I finish my version, it will have the plug at the end, and maybe a few tweaks here and there. So, just a quick overview of the head before I go on as well, because I know when I designed this, I wanted the character to appear like he's emanating light from the inside of his body and inside of his head. I have put a hole here just underneath the head to just give us some more sort of 3D geometry to play with when we're unwrapping, when we're texturing. Okay, so overall this is what we're going to be working with. Just turn on the wireframe. This is what we're going to be working with. Okay, I've made the hands very basic because, again, like I said in class, this is going to be like an asymmetric. I can imagine this being an isometric game like this, in this sort of area, this sort of camera angle. So what we don't want you to do is go into crazy detail, connecting all these parts and making sure it's anatomically correct. Being a shadeless texture as well. We can texture this so a lot of these sort of merging parts are hidden. So as you can see for the hand, just an overview, I've just made each one of these little sections separate. So when we pose him, we can pose him very easily without using a rig. I've just got the bottom of the fingers and the top of the fingers. At the palm, and I've got the thumb. I've just moved it over to the other side as well. Okay, so let's hide that and let's begin. So first thing I will probably do is go in and make the legs and the arms, because the legs and the arms can be made from the exact same piece of geometry with only a couple of cuts, and then we've made the legs effectively, and we don't need to go and remake the arm from a separate piece. Everything can be made from one piece, which is kind of like a cornerstone of 3D modeling. You want to make sure that you can do the most with the fewer amount of assets and the fewer amount of polygons as well. You don't need to put thousands of polygons into something that which could only be represented by 10, let's say. So if I just make a cylinder, you can see that we've got our standard 20-sided cylinder. I'm going to say that's probably too much. We don't need that amount. Oh, okay. So Maya's given me the bug, so I'm just going to pause and fix this issue, and then I'll come back. Okay, so we're back. Maya was just giving me a bug where it seems to be in 16 this, where if I select something, the tools don't appear to change unless you move the camera, and then it kind of resets, but also your channel box doesn't appear. But if that ever happens, just make sure you save, close the program, then open it back up, and fingers crossed it should work again. So mine's working again. So with that 20-sided cylinder made, I'm going to say that this is too big. There's too many faces here we need to deal with. This being, again, I need to stress that this is like aimed for an iOS, Android mobile game, so our economy of polygons and texture is very important. It's best for us to think of how to save as much as we can. So I'm going to change this down to 12. When I was modeling this for the first time, I discovered that one real kind of thing that happens when you have a 12-sided cylinder with this character is that if we look here across where the knee meets the calf, where the thigh, the upper leg meets the lower leg, you've got the inset there, but we've got two vertical edges that run down, or more or less the center of those lines. So we're already dictating two edges to cut along. and that's at the front and the back, because remember this is a 3D object, there's going to be a reverse and there's going to be a front, so we need to keep that into account. And if you also look, there's two cuts, and I'm going to say cuts in inverted commas, 2 points we can cut across. So we've got where the actual 2 points meet here across the bottom, just before the little stick comes out the bottom of the upper leg. We've got where the 2 points meet, and then we've got the little stick coming down, and then we've got where the stick meets the inset of the lower leg, if that makes any sense. For me, it's a very visual thing. I can see exactly what's happening, so I have a very good idea of what I'm going to do next, and I'm going to go to my insert edge loop tool, make sure multiple edge loops is selected, turn that to 2, and I'm going to make a cut. So I get my 2 new edges, and I'm going to bring one edge down to there and one edge up to there, just there. So as you can see, if I just go around now, I have got symmetry turned on, pardon me, so I'm just going to turn that off because that might be a bit confusing for some people. Turn off symmetry. If I go to select these edges now, select them, select them, select them, select them, you can see that if you're able to see, we've got this orange line tracing the shape of this inset. It's not perfect to the design. I mean, it's not. It's very, very close. It's incredibly close. So I'm going to call that being the actual shape we need. So with those selected, I'll just go to Edit Mesh, Detach, and now that has, if we go into Perspective mode, and we go to actually separate our objects using that tool, we've now got our upper leg here, and our lower leg here, and the mechanics are already made for us. I mean, we've got the little inset, and we've got the little rod going into the inset already made from the exact same piece of geometry, so we don't have to make the upper leg and then make another piece and make the lower leg. Everything comes out the same piece, and this is what I'm talking about when I say like economy of topology, or doing as little, no, doing as much with as little as you can. So this is all more or less made, but if we just move this guy up, you can see that where we've cut, there's still the hole of the inside, and we want to make sure we can seal those, and that's very, very simple. So I'm gonna isolate this one bit, so I've only got the upper leg, and I know I need to bridge across these 2 points, so I'm gonna grab that one and grab that edge there. I'm gonna bridge across, and I'm gonna turn my divisions down to 1. I'm gonna do the same on the other side, just very quickly. Divisions down to 1, and then I'm gonna do the same across here just to seal this bottom hole. Divisions down to 1. There you go. 1. So the reason I turned the divisions down to 1 is with a 12-sided shape, cut the way we've cut it here. Well, if we look here, we've got 6 edges, and you might be thinking, well, what does that mean? So with a bridge, you can only bridge something that's opposite. You can't bridge 2 points that are sitting next to each other here. But if we look here, we've got 1, 2, 3. So this edge and this edge are now parallel. So if we bridge it with no divisions, we've now made a quad right there. And same here. So obviously we can't bridge this one to this one because it just won't work. It doesn't know how to do it. It gives us our red message because it looks for adjoining vertices and edges, and then follows those around. Or in the case of if you've got 2 objects which are separate, it'll just see it as a separate object, so it knows to bridge across there. So we do the same here and here. In fact, we'll do 2 sides at once. So selecting these 2 top ones and these 2 bottom ones, and then we'll bridge. And there you go. So that's our leg made. Our upper leg completely done. The geometry is completely done. So now all we have to do is select the bottom one. Select the bottom one. Thank you. Isolate it, and then we do the exact same thing but in reverse. So I'm going to select and just make this bottom one, and remember I'm going to keep it 1 division because the 1 division thing still works here. So I'm going to go do this guy, and I'm going to go do, oh, excuse me, this guy. then we can see there that we've got two edges here that are parallel to these two edges, which we can bridge across with no divisions. And then we've got these two, we can bridge across with no divisions, just like that. And then that is our leg made. The only thing we might have to do now is just move some of the verts into a better position. Oops, I've got a setting turned on somewhere. Yep. So all we need to do now is just move these into a better position for the legs and the hip. I'm just going to move the hips up a little bit, so about there, because this is going to be hidden inside the body cavity. So now with this one piece here, we've made both the arms and the legs. So let's do the arms. So with this made, all we're going to do is go combine it, so it's all one object, and then we're going to go to modify center pivot so we can control it using the center pivot, and then we're just going to duplicate it and move it up to the arm. And so what we're going to do is we're going to rotate it around, turn on X-ray to make it a bit easier. So we're going to move it into position so that it goes with the actual angle of the arm as best we can make it. So if I just press R and W, you can see that our manipulator isn't quite in line with what we want. So if we go to, so we've rotated the object, we've changed the object's orientation. So we can actually line this manipulator up with that orientation quite easily. If we go to our little hammer here, which is the third one along, give our option box here, and in the first one we've got axis orientation. If we drop that down, go to object, you can see now that our manipulator will do that. We have to do that for each one of the objects, unfortunately, each one of the manipulators. You can see now that with the orientation changed to object, our manipulators follow the rotation of the object because it has been rotated. So now we do a little trick. Well, there's two ways we can do this. The old-fashioned way is if we just scale from the center here, we can scale it down like that, and you know we're almost there. But one way we can do this is by, if we hold Control and drag on the Y-axis, we're basically telling our manipulator to ignore that axis. See there? It's not getting shorter, because if we drag on the Y-axis normally, it gets shorter. If we drag on the X-axis, it gets squatter, and the same for the Z-axis. So if we hold Control and drag on the Y-axis, we're basically telling Maya to ignore that axis, like that. This is exactly what these little squares do as well. So the green square is telling us to ignore the green axis. The blue square is telling us to ignore the blue axis, and the red square is telling us to ignore the red axis. So from the front, I'm going to scale this down. I'm going to move these guys up so they fit here a bit better. Scale them in a little bit. I'm just going to move stuff into place. Now you can make the arm to size using the standard scaling like that, and there's nothing wrong with that. Me showing you that is just showing you an extra use of the tools. Yeah. So I was showing you that to just show you another way of using the tools, another function we can use. So from the side, I'm just going to line everything up now. I might actually just bring this in a little bit like that. So we've got our arms and our legs in place, and we can easily just flip them over to the other side using the duplicate with special, not the mirror, because what the mirror does is it takes, in this case, the most negative X vertex and then flips across that vertex on each one of these objects. So it's an object by object basis. We don't want to do that. We want to flip using the world as our pivot point. So now if I press W to bring up our translate, you can see that our translate's here. If I click combine, these two objects are now combined into one group, and you can see our pivot has now been centered in the middle of the world. And we can use that to flip across now. So if we go to edit, duplicate with special, and the option box, I'll just reset the tools for this. So this is what you're going to be met with. copy, instance. Instances mean you make a version of something which when you affect one, it affects the other. In this case we don't have to do this, so we're just going to keep it as copy. Keep parent, world, all that, we keep it parent. Now this is the one we have to do. So we want to flip it in the x-axis because we want to basically mirror across the red x-axis. We don't use translate, we don't use rotate, because translate would just move it so the top arm would stay in the same position. And rotate, everything would be flipped the wrong way around. Rotate the wrong way around. So we want to actually use scale, because if we go -1 in the very first box, because this is X, Y, Z, and we hit duplicate special, basically what it does, it in an instance, it scales it in to 0 and then scales it up to -1. So it basically scales in and then scales out. It does that, and then obviously it scales so much it scales the other way and flips it in 0 and flips it in 1. So there you can see that we've got both our arms and our legs in position. So all we need to do now is just select all of them, separate, and then we've got our, I'm just going to move that out of the way because that's going to get really annoying. Alright. There you go. Get ready. So there, we've got our arms and our legs in position, all nice and good. So the next thing I'm going to do is tackle the body. And with me, again, less is more. I'm going to make a simple cylinder, and I'm going to change that division down to 12 is again. Yeah, I'm going to fit it down to 12. I'm going to use another 12 for this because I think I can get the right amount of edges with a 12-sided shape. So I'm just going to scale that down. But one thing I do when I do anything like this is I don't go and try and extrude down each one of these levels as I go along, or go from here and move to I go in what I call extremes. So the very first thing I do is go up to the top of the neck and get that in place, and then the next thing I do is go down to the bottom of the body and then get that in place. So I know it's a rotation at the body, a rotation at the bottom, which scales out a little bit like that. And I'm going to go to the side and just do the exact same thing, make sure everything's in order. Now obviously because this is a 2D image that's hand drawn, there's going to be slight discrepancies between the two images, so it's up to you to kind of choose the best angle for whatever you're doing at that point. So if I just look at our character now, from the front he's got his neck in place and he's got the bottom of his sort of chassis in place, and from the side we have the same thing. If I go into perspective, focus in, you can see now that we've got most of the big gestural points in place. So I'm going to add 7 divisions going down, because I think that 7 divisions will be able to give us a really nice shape without overloading our poly count. So quite simply go down to our insert edge loop tool again, change that to a 7, insert. Now here I can literally just start going and moving stuff into place, moving stuff up and down. I mean, you don't just have to use a position of the new edges now, you can move them around a little bit. The only thing you need to watch out for is you don't cramp stuff together too much. You need to give stuff an equal space between faces, edges, vertex. You shouldn't really clump stuff up too much. So I'm just go through, turn on wireframe. I'm just going to go through and I'm going to just make sure everything fits. I'm going to go from the front first. And just move everything into place. The main thing I want to get above all else is this really nice transition between this bottom lower curve and then going into the kind of tubby upper chassis. And because this is going to be an isometric game style character, we don't need to worry about having the edges being perfectly perfect to what we're trying to represent. It doesn't matter that there's only 7 divisions. and it doesn't matter that if we stare at this, there is obviously sharp edges here. It doesn't matter. The human mind fills a lot of that information in for us. So from the side, obviously you can see that it's not quite right. So all I need to do now is just move everything into place, do a bit more finessing of the vertex, and just get everything into place. Again, I want to make sure even from this angle that I'm getting the really nice curve of the chassis in there. And that might mean a bit of moving around, not too much. Obviously, because we've already added in our divisions, we've done half the work for ourselves. In this case, is just, as you can see, just scaling out in two different axes and making sure that the edges are a bit more averaged, like that. Okay, I'm going to leave it as that. Okay, looks pretty nice. Nice and round, so when he's up there in that angle and he's running about, you can tell that he's got a round body. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to make the sort of undercarriage cavity, because as the way I designed this character, I envisioned him having a light in his body and a light in his head. So I want to kind of make a point of having them really cool, like lights emitting from his insides. So all I'm going to do is select all those 16 or 12 bottom faces. I just did one extrusion inwards, and I'm going to do another extrusion upwards and maybe scale it in a little bit, and that's it. That's all I need to do for that section, because obviously that's going to be hidden. If we're at that angle as well, it's not going to be seen. But this being a shaderless texture, we can paint all this and we can dictate what this looks like inside. We don't have to worry about the light cascading inside, because the light won't be affecting our mesh at all. So I'm just quickly going to do the neck as well, and the neck is done by the exact same thing, the exact same way. Selecting all these top faces. Excuse me, I lose my voice a little bit. And then we just scale in once. I'm just going to move that up before I do another extrusion, and do another extrusion, and then I'm just going to probably do one more scale in just to make a flat point, and then I'm going to move it up like that, so that our neck now sits nicely inside that little hole I made in his head. Nice little stylistic choice there. Very good. So there's two ways we can go now, or there's two ways I would go. That's either making the button here, or making the sleeves, and I think I'll do the sleeves first, because they're fairly simple and it really works. It's quite easy to do because I'm working at such a low poly. We've got 4 faces here where our sleeve can go, but if we delete those 4 faces, we've now got 8 faces, because obviously each one of those faces connects with 2 edges. So this face has these 2 edges, this face has these 2 edges. So if we delete all 4 of these faces, we now get 8 edges to deal with. And the same with this. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete half of the body for this, because we only need to, if we delete half of the body now, we only need to do something on one side, and then when that's done we can duplicate it over, and then it's going to be complete on the other side as well. So we've got 8 faces, 8 edges to deal with. I'm going to do one extrusion inwards to kind of make our edge flow for that. But what I'm also going to do is I'm going to start to kind of round these off a little bit. So I'm going to grab the 4 points at the edge, scale them in a little bit. I'm going to grab the entire thing and move it out, scale up a little bit. So at this point what I'm doing is I'm just literally just trying to get these edges looking as round as possible. And in fact what I will do, because in class I think I made this from a separate object, but because I've already made the edges I'm going to be using with these 8 edges I extruded, these 8 faces I extruded, I think I'm going to use those. I'm actually going to extrude the sleeve from the actual body itself, instead of having to go through and merge a separate geometry. So that's something I've realised in hindsight that might make my job a little bit easier. And all I'm going to do straight away is just extrude and just bring that into place and just try and get it looking as best I can. Obviously going for the X-ray, roughly getting it in place. I know that looking from the reference, the sleeve is kind of angled towards us, like that. And then from the side, I'm just doing the same thing. Move back a little bit, and I'm just gonna start rounding it out. Start getting these edges looking a bit more rounder. Like this. So at this stage, it's quite boring. All you're doing is what I call massage inverts. You're just literally grabbing them, moving them into a better position. And then when, like you see there, I've moved that entire edge to soften out the edge a little bit, soften out the shape. You can see here that I'm pulling, I'm like making a bit of a not very desirable angle here. With this, I'm just going to move this out to make sure that our edges are nice and relatively neat. Same there. I'm just going to move that down so that's not as crushing. Move that down. So again, this is why I love working low poly. Even when I'm working with high polys, if I'm working more polygonal before I do, if I work on a polygonal model like this before I take it to ZBrush, I prefer to spend a lot more time making this level of detail first, so that when I do take it into ZBrush, most of my form, if not all my form's already there. I don't have to worry about this is too flat, this is too round, whatever. I try and get as much as I can done in here beforehand. Because again, like I said, like I keep saying in class, for me it's all about control. I want to have as much control over my model as I can possibly have, so that I'm not allowing Maya to dictate the way I work. So at that stage, I'm going to say that's pretty good. Obviously, it's not the most roundest thing in the world, but again, if we're up here and he's running about, we're not going to notice. So the only thing I'm going to do now is put one division round the edges, just so I can get that little bump there, just like that. And maybe even add one down here. Just to kind of make like an inset. That won't be seen in the actual game character, but what that can be used for is when we're actually unwrapping the character to UV him, we can use that as like a landmark, as to kind of paint in the seam. It just helps us a little bit more with our UVing. Because just like clothes, we can think of this sort of stuff as having some sort of seam to cut along, and it just helps us understand stuff a lot more. And it also helps me kind of, now that I've added that in, I can see that some bits are a little bit too flat, so I can go in and start to just soften them out. Like that. Yeah. A lot of what 3D modeling is, when you first start learning it especially, is just getting used to moving around the model, looking at stuff in a 3D space, because it's very easy to look at something as a 2D image, even in 3D. Because if it looks good from this angle, it doesn't always mean it looks good from other angles. And that's the beauty of 3D, is it can be seen, obviously, from 360 degrees. So, that's just me kind of faffing around, nitpicking. Oops, did something there. So now what I'm going to do now, oh, is Maya giving me another, there we go. Maya is starting to give me some issues, so I'm just going to do a save, because I don't want Maya to Now this is just on my version that Maya's doing some weird stuff. It might not be happening on your version, but if you ever do kind of think that Maya might be freaking out a little bit, just save, just to be safe. So now I'm going to make the interior of the sleeve, because I can't leave this open because we see the inside cavity, and then that won't be good. It won't be rendered. We'll see through the character. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to make our sleeve, making sure that because he's a cartoon character, we can dictate this sleeve having a bit of depth. And then when it's like that, I might just move it in a little bit more. I'll do another extrusion like that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to... Oh, my ear is giving me that little bug. Oh. I'm just going to select... So I'm going to isolate this for a start. I'm going to select all these new faces I've got in here. Make sure I've only got them selected. And I'm going to merge them. So now that I've got that sealed sleeve going on there. There you go, so that's my sleeve made. And I'm just going to select the model. I'm going to mirror it over this time because I can use the center as my mirror. I'm just going to make sure I set that to merge as well. Merge mode. So that's our sleeves made. So the only thing to do now in the body, really, besides some minor tweaking, is to make the button. Now, this takes a little bit of investigation. So in class I made a 16-sided cylinder, and I think I'm going to do that again. So I'm going to make my cylinder and I'm going to turn it to 16, because even though this is going to be a low poly character, I think the button needs a bit more resolution given to it, because it's going to be such a vital part of his character probably. So I'm going to move it into place and scale it roughly to the right size, but I'm going to make sure that part of it merges into the mesh, and you'll see why in a second. So now that I can see that it's merging into the mesh across these, fully across these 6 faces, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, there you go, and I can see that it kind of merges into these ones here and here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to select these faces here, these edges should I say, and scale them out and move them back. Maybe just massage them, so because I've disrupted the curve of the body there a little bit. So I'm just going to go in and just bring that back a little bit. Maybe scale that in, bring that up, and move it back a little bit to maintain that curve. So what we've got now is we've got this shape. We've got these 6 sides just there. And if we delete those, we've now given ourselves a cavity, and we've got a perfect inset for our button. And we've got a 10-sided shape. We've got a 10-sided. In fact, no, I'm not going to use a 16 for the sake of saving a few a few triangles. I'm actually going to make a 10-sided, 10-sided cylinder. Now, one thing I'm always hesitant about using these sort of cylinders for is that you have one going across the middle, or in some cases you've got one division going down the middle like this. But what you don't have is a division going down the center and a division going across the middle like that. And I always try and work with geometry that's like that, because it's a lot easier to do when you're needing to do stuff that's mirrored. It's a nice even number. It's going to give you a lot more control. It's a lot easier to handle if you try and merge it into other things. But in this case, because I already know that I'll be merging into a 10-sided shape, 10-sided edges, I'm just going to change that to 10. And I'm going to make sure that my center divide, I've got that line running parallel to the center of our character. Because if I had a character that was like that, then I've got this one edge which is then facing into a line, so that will cause me issues. So I'm just going to make sure that I've got something like this. Okay. And again from the side, I'm just going to move it into place so it's a bit, it fits the actual design a bit more. Don't worry about the button having some form of bulge to it. Again, that was just a design thing. We can do that later on, so don't worry about getting it in now, I should say. We can do that later on. So I'm just going to move this and scale it into place so it's kind of in the right sort of shape. And then I'm just going to start moving to try and trace the shape of this thing a bit more. Trace the inset a little bit more. And I'll absolutely take all the inside faces out because I don't need them. They'll just get in the way. So take all these 10 faces, get them out of here. Boom. So now I should have something that looks like that. Cool. Now one thing I do want to have is that might not be a bit, it might not be very apparent on the drawing, is I do want a little bit of an inset where I don't want the button to be completely flush with the body, because even though yes this is going to be an isometric character which is going to be like that, I do want to, even like if this was a power up button, we might do some sort of camera change where it might be facing him, where he punches his button to power up, something like that. So we want to make sure that even at this level of polygon, this level of topology, that we can emphasize some structural shape. So I do want to have the little inset here, and you'll understand what I mean in a second. So I'm going to scale it down a little bit, and I'm going to do one extrusion in from these edges. So I start to make a proper edge flow there. Oh, that's bad. I accidentally deleted some faces there. So I'm going to fix some stuff now. So this is why you should always be very aware of what you're doing. When you're doing these mass selections and stuff, you got to be very aware about what you're selecting. So I'm going to have to fix this from the side now. Yeah. Okay, yeah, we're all good. Yep, cool. So now I've made this new load of faces here. Now these are the ones that are truly going to trace this shape. So, oops. So I'm going to get these faces a bit closer. Closer in. From the front. What we can do is basically what we do now is we're lining them up with their corresponding vertex. So as you can see, oops, here and here, they got a vertex here, we've got a vertex here, we're lining them up, a vertex here and a vertex here, we're lining them up. And this is why we're using a 10-sided cylinder, because each one of these has a corresponding edge they can merge with. But right now what we're doing is we're just making sure that our vertex line up as best they can with their corresponding vertex on the cylinder. And again, this just needs some massaging of the vertex. It's quite boring. So this is a great time just to put some music on. Just get into your own space. Just relax while you're doing this, because it is very, very boring. So I'm going to call it there. It's probably not perfect. That's enough. So you can see that we're actually tracing our cylinder a lot better. So I'm going to select both our objects now in object mode and combine them. And what I'm very simply going to do is bridge between these 2 points, like that. Oh, right. So what you might find, if you just select the entire ring and then select another entire ring, you might get something that happens like this. So if you go inside, you can see that what's actually happening is an edge. We're not bridging to the edges we want. Like an edge, this edge might be bridging to this edge over here. So everything kind of gets twisted on each other. So what I'm going to do is let it back, and I'm going to bridge two edges first. I'm going to bridge these two groups of edges. So what that does, it kind of gives us an anchor point for our bridge to make sense of where to bridge. So with those two bridged, I'm just going to go through and make sure all the other edges are bridging like that, and bridge it. Cool. So now let's make sure everything's nice and connected. Now I left a single division going down the center. I'm just going to see what it looks like if I just do what I think. So I'm just using that to bring that in a little bit, to give a bit more of an inset. And I'm thinking, no, I don't want that. So I'm going to delete that edge. And then all I'm going to do again is, just like we did before, I'm just going to massage these verts into place so they fit the form a little bit better. So places that are getting a bit too close, like up here, I'll just bring those out a little bit, just let them breathe. And these two as well, just let them breathe a little bit. Maybe correspond. So with that done, so we're not quite done yet. Even though it's our buttons in place, we've got to make sure that we've not disrupted our topology, our flow of the topology too much. So I'm going to go through, I'm just going to make sure that we still have as soft a form as we can on this character. Okay. So for now I'm going to leave it like that. The only thing I'm going to do on the button now is I'm actually going to bevel the very top rim like that, and add an inset here, add a line of edges here, and then just scale that in a little bit, just to give a nice little form. And because it's low poly, you can go in and you can adjust stuff as you want, as you see fit. So I'm maybe just like that. Cool. So that, all in all, is our body done and our arms done. And now all we need to do is I'll bring back the other version. So I'll just grab these and put them in their own layer again. I'll bring back the other version for that. So in this version I've got my neck in, my sleeves in, my button in, got my legs in, but I've also got my hands and my feet. So the feet, I started off with a cube, because if you look at a foot and you squint your eyes and you kind of look at it as the most basic form, it's a cube. And in this case I'm not too fussed about it looking absolutely perfect like a human foot kind of thing. As long as we get the general shape of this guy's foot in there, you can see that it is more or less a cube, and from the front it has got that slight slant to it. So something like this is perfectly fine. What I've not done is I've not merged the leg to the foot, because when we pose this, I want to make sure that we'll be able to get some sort of foot posing in there. We can do some fun stuff with the foot when we get our pivots in the right place. And for the hands, all I did was make a cube for the actual palm. I subdivided it 3 times down the centre and 3 times across the centre to give us this sort of shape. And then let's grab the edges here, grab these edges, move them in so I can just give a curve to the hand. Because even though it's a robot, I kind of wanted to have the human curve. If you look at the hand, the back of your hand, it does kind of curve. It's not a straight flat surface. And then I just did the exact same thing, but I just traced out the general shape of the fingers. And I did it in 2 parts because I wanted to be able to very easily pose. When we go in and actually make our rotate our pivot position properly. We can actually give a pretty nice pose to our character when we upload it to Sketchfab. Instead of having a nice T pose like this, which is all well and good, we can give a really nice pose at the same time. So that's what I did for the hand. You can see there, I just made a cube, subdivided it. Well, I did 2 divisions going down the center, and then I just moved those verts around. That's all I did. And then for the thumb, I just made a cube up the top. I made a rectangle first. If I go from the front, it will make it more clear. I made a rectangle, put 2 subdivisions down the middle, and 1 subdivision down the center, down the side. And again, I just basically traced out the thumb very, very easily, so that when we come to pose our character, and we've got a pretty good thumb to go off. But again, because this is an isometric character, this is a low poly character, we don't have to worry about that thumb being super hyper realistic. It's not the point. This is all about learning how to use low poly characters, low poly shapes, and get ourselves reacclimated with Maya. So I just rushed over that very quickly because everyone seemed to get it quite well in the class. At that point, that is a character done geometrically. It's again, I just made a little hatch at the back here just by selecting the corresponding faces here. There was 12 of them here, and then I extruded out and then just softened the edges a little bit just to give that little flap at the back. And I believe that's everything. Like I said, super quick, super kind of rushed video because I don't think you need to have loads and loads of explanations about this. I'm looking forward to seeing what you produce, and the next thing we'll be doing is actually unwrapping the character and texturing it and then posing it in our scene. So, thank you very much.